Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to Brave Embrace. I am excited to be here today because we're going to talk in depth about the system that it takes, the stakeholders that it takes to take people from being a victim into a survivor. Recently, there was a 12-state operation in a human trafficking ring to help states coordinate. And in that situation, there were more than 60 victims rescued and there were more than 100 arrests. So today I have with me two amazing women that come from the front line. They have seen what it takes to survive. They have been survivors and they walk people through advocacy so they can become healed and survivors. So let me welcome, please, Ave and Sam with me today.
Hello.
Hey.
So glad that you have us.
Thank you for being willing to share how you have made it to this place and how advocacy has changed your life. And so tell me a little bit about what daily life looks like for both of you in the role of an advocate and working with survivors.
Well, I am the assistant director, so I don't necessarily play a role in the clients that we serve their lives on a day-to-day basis. They don't see me anyway. I'm always knowing what's going on with their cases, but they don't actually interact with me. In my downtime, I do go over to the shelter and just to go play with like the kids and stuff like that if I can, because it is a nice stress relief. But I oversee the programming, and so we have programmings where we go over all of our clients' outreach and in-house, and kind of see where they're at, where we need to go. It's always going to be different. We do everything case by case, so looking at all the barriers that are in the way, how we can overcome them, and then really where they're trying to go is just kind of like where we're going to lead them. So I may not see them, but I'm always a part of their case.
I see. So Ave, how about you?
So I am the domestic violence case manager, and every day is different for me. I work directly with the survivors. I set up their case plan based on what their barriers are and kind of walk them through court, anything they really need. If they need to go to Walmart and they don't have transportation, I'm able to provide that transportation. Basically anything that they're needing, they'll come to me and I'll try to figure it out from there.
Wow, that is crucial in closing the gaps that exist. So you work in a rural area in a state that was part of this Operation United Front. So when a sting like that happens, are you guys available to work directly on the scene and help those survivors of situations like that?
So we never actually go on the scene. We have been a part of some other stings that have happened. And usually the police, if they have a victim advocate, they're the ones who go on the scene, whether it's like a city advocate or a county. And then we're really in close relations with all those victim advocates, and then they will call us. We usually have to talk to those victims firsthand. If they want to become a client, whether they want to come into shelter or they just want to be like an outreach client. But through the victim advocates and the officers, sometimes they'll call with just an officer as well. That's how we kind of get connected with those survivors.
I see. And your program serves sexual violence as well as domestic violence. So that would include human trafficking and also like any interpersonal violence, violence between students or young folks in relationships, all of those types of victimizations.
Oh yeah, we have people from all ages, all walks of life. We do so when it comes to domestic violence, it does need to be intimate partner. But then when it's sexual violence, it could be the perpetrator could be anybody. It could be stranger, family, intimate partner, any of them. And then also their pets can come with them. So that's another cool aspect with us is that if they're fleeing domestic or sexual violence and they have an animal, then they are also able to bring them with us or bring them to us. We have 2 facilities that can help house them.
That is a wonderful way to help keep a family together, but also help, say, a woman who is escaping a situation know that she can keep her pets safe as well. So Ave, as a case manager and working, with survivors, you see a lot of the pain and trauma they carry, I'm sure. And what are some ways that you build relationship with them so that they know they can trust you and they'll lean on you for those needs?
Well, we do an intake meeting within 48 hours of them arriving to the shelter. Um, I'll personally go over to the shelter and introduce myself, who I am, what we're kind of going to work on, and then we'll get them scheduled to come in for their first case management meeting. All our meetings happen over at our outreach building, so completely away from the shelter. We do provide childcare, so we have a youth advocate that provides childcare. So when we're doing these meetings, mom can just be with me one-on-one, and she can openly talk to me as much as she feels like, and we have that rapport that we built over those meetings.
I see. And so is it during those meetings that you kind of help identify what some of those gaps and needs are? You talked about barriers. So explain that a little bit for me.
So everybody comes in with a different case. It's never the same. They might be similar, but they're always different. So depending on where they're at, sometimes they start with having ex partes already. Sometimes they don't know if they want ex partes. So we kind of just walk them through their options if they want to file for one, or if they have filed for one. We kind of sit up and talk about how court will look like for them. If they're needing hygiene products or clothing products, they kind of they put in some financial requests if we don't have it at the shelter, so we're able to go and purchase those for them. So if that's one of their barriers is they have no clothing, then we're able to go do that for them.
Or even like I know a common thing that we see is like they don't have any of that important documentation that they need, like birth certificates, driver's license, social security. Some of those things were taken away, or they just never even had them or knew where they were at to begin with. That's another common barrier. Working, like we have to help them find jobs, or if they're not able to work, if they have to file for disability, anything like that, we'll try to do whatever it is that they need.
Medicaid, if they need to apply for Medicaid, or food stamps, WIC, any resources that they're needing. Like we have a Shiloh Center here, which helps with children up to 5 years old. They help with diapers, formula, any baby items they're needing. They have a whole baby closet that they have. We're able to refer them to like those kinds of resources.
Yeah, or like even their mental health needs. Like we don't have an on-site counselor. We have in the past, but we haven't for a while. And so we have a few places here in town that we can help hook them up with, and we can transport them there if they need it, or if they need to go to the city. Yeah, we'll help try to get them set up with anything that they need.
I see. So someone escaping a situation, whether like in the situation of this, the sting that they did and recovered or allowed rescue for women that had found themselves exploited sexually, they come with probably nothing. So you're able to not only help them reestablish those identity needs as far as, like you said, any documents, driver's license or social security card, helping them with the insurance and also the transportation to do that. So this sounds so empowering for someone who feels, empty and exploited. What's that like for you?
It's an adjustment that you have to kind of get used to. Like when I first started, I thought I knew what I was coming into, and then I was actually working it, and you see people at their most vulnerable, and they're sometimes wanting to just share that with somebody because they've never been able to. And so you're going to see and hear things a little more in depth than maybe what you were originally thinking was going to happen, especially because like when I first came in, I wasn't like a case manager or anything. I just kind of worked in the house. And so I figured, oh, they're only going to come talk to me if they need something like more hygiene products or clothing, or, they just have a quick question of like, what's this phone number or whatever. But you actually get to spend time with them and like get to know them, and they will pour their hearts out to you. And so it was definitely an eye opener whenever I first started. Now, like I said, I don't get to talk to them that much. I do occasionally, and they see me. I stop at the shelter every morning and stuff, so I get to see some of them routinely if they're up and moving and stuff like that. And I get to say hey, and I'll go see the kids every once in a while. But it's still like like it still feels good, like everything that we're doing, and then knowing that we're helping all these people all the time, no matter what part of life that they're in or where they're trying to go. And it's hard, but it's very rewarding work to do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Sam, you shared that, growing up, you experienced and witnessed, some different types of situations where you look back now and you see the abusive nature of them, or you saw relationships where maybe friends in or colleagues in where there was abuses, mental health and physical. You've seen the sexual abuses. So, how do you work every day in that environment and yet protect your heart and keep yourself strong when some of these things can be triggering?
Yes, that is actually, it's something I feel like that I still work on every day. Um, I'm fortunate enough that I am really good with boundaries and I know how to close off certain things. So like my work and personal life are very separate. Um, and I feel like you have to have that ability to kind of be in this line of work because they can blend very fast. You can hear a story that is going to have some pieces that might be similar to something that you personally went through or that you have witnessed and been a part of, and it can really get to somebody's mental health really fast as well. It can take you back, and it can almost like you freeze in that moment, but you just have to, I don't know how to describe it. People have asked me like, oh, how do you do that? I'm like, I really don't know how. I think my brain just does a good job at learning how to separate it. And it's like I push back my own things that might be coming back because I'm leaving that space open for the person who I'm trying to help. So I try to remember that, like, this isn't about me. This moment isn't about me. This is about who I'm trying to assist right now. And then later on, if I know that I'm going to hear something triggering, so like I know when I hear sexual abuse stories, they trigger me more often than domestic violence stories. And so then I know, okay, after I'm done talking with this person or even going through a training, I'm going to need some time to like self-care for myself. So like at the end of the day, I'll usually, or if I need to take a break at work, I will. But otherwise, I'm like, okay, tonight I'm going to do X, Y, and Z when I get home. And it's going to help, whether it's meditating, going for a walk, going for a hike, or just doing nothing and watching a movie or something. I know how to like give myself that space and that time so that it doesn't trigger me and it doesn't send me back to a negative headspace. And you just have to do it every day.
Love that. I mean, you've really found a way to master it. I'm sure that your experiences and some of the trauma and pain you've gone through fuels the work and the desire. Ave, how about you? How did you get pulled into this field and this important work?
I was a criminal justice major. So right out of high school, I went to do a criminal justice in college. I didn't know where I wanted to go with it. I knew I wanted to help people. And I was going in to be a police officer, but then I stopped college and I went into the military as a police officer. And I actually got pregnant and was able to get out of that. And after my son, everything changed, and I didn't want to be a police officer in today's environment. But I knew I still wanted to help people. I still wanted to be there for the victims. And this job post came up, and I was like, that would be absolutely perfect for me. Like, I want to do that's like my dream job.
Yes. And the impact it sounds like both of you are having every single day in small ways and big ways is exactly the definition of brave. It to me is overcoming your own experiences, your own, fears of things that you've known and been a part of, yet to give back, to people. It's wonderful. And I just appreciate it so much. As a survivor, I know the impact it has and how it helps people be restored. Yeah, and especially now that we are seeing. So you brought up the military, and I know we're going to be doing a segment in the coming months on military sexual assault and abuse. I know there's been increased numbers, just everywhere. What are some? I don't want to ask you specific statistics, put you on the spot, but are you seeing a rise in reporting and in people sharing during COVID, and just with some of the things that have been in the media?
Definitely. I follow a military page for women. And around the time that the Vanessa Golan, or I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, happened, there's a lot of their stories being shared on my social media, and it definitely brought back some memories from being in the military. and being a woman in the military. So
And we're like, what the closest base to us is like
Whiteman.
hour and a half away, kind of. So it's not too far. And so sometimes we do get some cases that come our way. We've even gotten military cases. I think most of ours actually come out of state. It seems lately anyway. And so we do run into some military cases, but we actually just did a good training a month or two ago. It was solely on like abuse and in the military and stuff like that. And it was a really big eye opener because there's a whole other side of things. You know, they have their own judicial system basically, and then they have to go through the military system and the civil system. Like they don't overlap each other. And so it's like, if you want to get an order of protection in the civil courts, that's fine, but it may not protect you on the military base, or vice versa. You have to go get two of them basically. And you know, they protect their own, and so sometimes it's really hard and they don't protect all of them. So it's really tricky. And then just with like COVID, it's scary because we, in the beginning, we weren't getting as many calls, and we know it's a big part of that was because nobody could leave home, especially when everyone had the stay-at-home orders. And so it's a lot harder to call for help when you're stuck in the same house with the person who's hurting you. And so it seemed really eerie and weird in the beginning because we were kind of just slower than usual. And then soon, once that, especially when the stay-at-home order lifted, and you know, it started going crazy again. But with our federal funding and some of the regulations that got passed, we had to cut our capacity in half. So then it's like we couldn't even serve over half the people that we normally did. And so it seemed like we went from, I think before it was like every one in four people or something like that got turned away, and then the numbers just got bigger. And then moving from everywhere, I mean, we were getting calls from out of state even more than usual, because I'm sure every shelter was the same way. And so it was like people had to really expand of where they were trying to get help from, because nobody had the space and the resources and stuff. And I know some people lost their funding, or their funding got cut. We were fortunate enough to not have too many issues with that. And we did get a little bit of extra like COVID funds for certain things. We never had to close our doors. I know some places that did have to, unfortunately. And we were able to start utilizing hotels more. So if we were full and people were like high lethality victims, then we could put them up in a hotel. Our outreach grew, it's not surprising if you think about it, because if you can't come into shelter, you're still going to try to get help elsewise. But our outreach, I mean, I know there was one time, so we have 2 case managers. We had 3 at one point, but each client or each case manager had 30 plus clients just in outreach. It was ridiculous. And a lot of those also were court clients. So we were having to try to manage how to get to court. And then with COVID in the court system being all crazy, like you had to learn that whole new dynamic. And it was like, are we doing Zoom? Are we not? Are we going? Because there was a while they wouldn't let us into court. Only the victim and the perpetrator could go to court. No victim advocates could go, which made it really hard. And it deterred people from even wanting to go and get that protection that they could get, because they were like, I don't want to be in the courtroom with them. Like, I can't be with them with nobody else there in between us, or to be there emotionally to support us. And so it's kind of a rough time. But we made it through. And I mean, we're still at half capacity, but our outreach is still big. We're thriving. We're able to do a lot more with our clients and stuff. And I feel like our calls have gone back to similar of how they were before COVID. It's not like a low, and it's not like a super high peak. But I do feel like it kind of helped us with our relationships with other shelters around us, because we had to be in more communication with each other than normal, because there were times where they're like, hey, we have this person who needs this, and we're either out of funds or we're out of space. Like, are you able to help them in any way? So I think it kind of did bring us closer together with some other people around in the community, and even in like surrounding counties. So that part was kind of nice, because I've actually gotten to know a lot of people at other shelters that I had no idea who they were before.
Right. So that helps even more to know you can meet the needs when you know you have other options and resources for them. And for example, with the Operation United Front, and 60 survivors needing a place to go, needing resources, needing help, and maybe some long-term help. It's so nice to know that agencies like yours can partner, and there can be ways to organize that still with them. And I hadn't really thought about how it affected your ability to provide services during COVID in the court system, not being able to go in, not being able to meet them in various locations and things. So I'm sure that caused all of you to pivot a little with how you were doing the normal job. Is that right, Have?
Oh yeah.
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 Yes.
Well, there was a time where none of us were even in the office. So we did everything remotely. So it was more Zoom and phone calls with clients. There was no like in person, which kind of took away from helping to build that trust and rapport because it wasn't as authentic feeling. And I would come in the office every once in a while, like when we needed to print something and like I needed the office equipment because I live by the office too. So it's like, if anybody needed anything, I'd be like, give it to me. I'll run into the office real quick and do it. But it was definitely an interesting time of having to work. We did a lot of trainings though. That's a lot of us had more time to do trainings in it. And it did help us in the long run. We got more trauma informed trainings and specific things tailored more like for the court system. And it was all just a learning process as well. But I feel like it did help us gear back up for when we did come back.
I see. That's a great way to utilize that time for sure. You both seem to kind of be willing to see the silver lining, even in the midst of that, which makes me think, how great for both of you to have come, in situations where you understood the need for support and advocacy, and then to be choosing to do that as a living and as your way of life. And I'm honored by that. Yeah, for sure. So
yeah, I'm always telling them, I'm like, hey, prepare for the worst, but expect nothing but the best, because like, you'll be surprised. Like some things we're like, oh man, it's going to go in such a terrible way. And then it goes great. And I'm like, no, you got to be ready for the good times too. Like, yeah. But if it does go bad, you're ready. But let's not hope that that's happening.
Wow, that brings so much light. I can just see how, someone coming in the dark times of their life, like you explained, and Ave working with them to build a plan basically and to help manage all the needs, that need for resiliency is there. And so tell me a little bit about your thoughts on resiliency, both of you.
So just working with these survivors, you have to be resilient. You have to be able to keep coming in every day and fighting for them. It's a hard job, and it never gets easier. You just keep fighting and working towards their goal and
just fighting for them.
Yes.
Yeah, because some of these people have nobody but us. Like, honestly, some of them are fortunate enough to have a good support system and will help them get to it. But there are also some people who they maybe have been isolated so long, or they had problems with support systems in the past, and maybe their current situation just made it even harder and more distant. And so sometimes we are all that they have, and we're complete strangers when they first meet us. So I think it's just incredible to see the resiliency that our clients can even have, because I mean, we know what we've been through, but our situation's really different. And fortunately, we both had support systems. So like, even we can't imagine what it would be like to not have one and not have anybody. So I always tell them, I'm like, hey, kudos to you, because you're getting it, and you are starting with ground zero, and here we are, ground 100 already. And it's been like a week or something, So
wow.
It's like incredible to see, like, even like in I'm kind of a nerdy person. So like, even in like I remove myself from the situation thing, just to see how the human brain can come back and like recover from something. I mean, everyone needs a certain amount of times, but some of these clients, I'm just like, I get so impressed and I get so emotional on the inside about them, because I'm like, man, how did you do that? I don't know how, but I'm so glad that you did. And I mean, we're always here to support them every step of the way, but like, it really does impress me, like the way that the human body and the brain can just like bounce back if you give them the right environment and resources and the support that they need. It does a lot. It really does.
Thrive, even coming out of different levels of trauma. Do you all see a difference in the types of clients and the way their trauma shows up, like different, you say, from a domestic violence survivor, human trafficking, or in sexual exploitation or abuse? Or do you see like levels of trauma? How would you describe that?
Yeah, Ave and I were just kind of talking about this. So not too long ago, we had a stages of healing training that we did, and there's five different stages. I was kind of in and out of the training. It was a crazy day for me. So Ave knows more about it. And I missed the first part, which was like the most important part. But yeah, it does differ. We actually, like Ave said, she's our domestic violence case manager, but our other one is actually specifically for sexual assaults. There's a lot of things that can overlap and they can seem similar, but they're different types of crimes, different victimizations. And so the healing is going to look a little bit different. You're going to have some who, like with sexual violence, they tend to, I don't want to say are like less social, but it's sometimes what we've seen here anyway, it's harder for them to even open up. And so giving them that time and that space, we've always separated sexual violence victims, like in the shelter, we understand. Like pre-COVID, sometimes we always have families by themselves in a room, but sometimes maybe a couple singles would share like a bedroom since they were big enough rooms. But when it came to like sexual violence, we wouldn't necessarily do that. If like we would ask them, like, do you mind being in a room with somebody or not? Because we know that trauma is, you do not want to put them with a person a lot of times, depending on like what their victimization totally encompassed and stuff. And so we would have support groups. We haven't been able to do them as much with COVID. We were doing them over Zoom for a while, but they started out specifically for like sexual violence, and then and anyone could come to them, even our domestic violence clientele and stuff. But then it kind of just blossomed into just like violence support groups, like whatever topic it is that they want to talk about, red flags, healing, and whatever else that they wanted to discuss is kind of like where that led to. But it is different, and they need different things. Like sometimes the domestic violence clients, they're more geared to like, this is what I need. This is what I need to move on in a life by myself. And sometimes our sexual violence, they really want to just focus on the healing internally of themselves before they're ready to do the external things. So giving them that space and that time and environment, and then of course, whatever resources that they need, because we can't provide everything, but we can figure out who can.
Mm-hmm. Yes, partnering with those other agencies to help meet the needs. And that's where your role comes in as well, right, Ave, where you can connect some of those dots?
Yes, definitely. And sometimes I do get some of those cases. It just depends on how many she's able to have and I have at the moment. But yeah, sometimes I'll get to work with them as well.
I see. So you've mentioned that you have children in the facility as well, and in your agency. So do you often see that the children vary depending upon whether they've been involved and witnessed a lot of the situations, or if they just kind of know about it, but they know they're moving? What kind of programming do you have for kids?
So prior to being the case manager, I was a youth advocate. So I was working with the kiddos a lot more, and every kiddo is different. A lot of them do come in and don't understand. They don't understand how to process. They don't know why mom left dad or why they're in the shelter, and that comes off as being tired or fussy, or just depending on what age group they are. If they're teens, they kind of know what's going on, and they don't know how to completely process it either. And it's a different way that they do process it. What I do know is kids are resilient, and they definitely bounce back quick. And I've worked with clients or kiddos that were sexually assaulted, and you would never know, because they are the most loving kiddos. They would always run up and give me hugs, and it's just, they are so resilient. Within a couple of months, you can just see a major change from when they first came to shelter, from when they are here a couple months and have grown and to loving kids.
I see, because they feel safe and cared for. They know their voice matters and that they're heard. And so you can see it just in the way they interact and the difference, the light that they bring, I bet.
Yes.
Yeah. That's during my career of advocacy, it was always so difficult in dealing with cases where the children were involved, and the kiddos, like you said, are willing to be resilient, and they like for things to be pretty normal. So once you can get through to them and build that relationship, which sounds like you guys focus on for sure. So what do you think that we're facing kind of right now with Me Too, the emergence of response for human trafficking, and so really pivoting there and having much more services available, understanding exploitation better, and the domestic violence side, Time's Up, all of that. Are you seeing some things playing out differently than before?
Yes and no. Like you mentioned, we're in a rural community, so I feel like it takes more time to get that through. I mean, we have a really great community here who is always willing to help us anytime we need anything. But it's the education and the awareness piece is I feel like it takes a little bit more effort, in the sense of they know what we're doing and they think it's great, but they don't really know. Like, they think they might know, or they have an idea, but they don't. And nobody even always knows, but like the extent of it, how prevalent it is where we currently live. Some people think, oh, small town, it's more in the city. That's a city thing. And it's like, that's actually everywhere. And also because not as many cases get prosecuted here in a rural county compared to in the city. So they're like, oh, it's not happening. And it's like, no, it's still there. It's harder when it's smaller for people to come forward and feel comfortable. Small town talk gets around really easily. And that's something that we see, especially, I mean, we get clients from all over, like even the city, because we are close to Kansas City. So like we'll have people come down here, but we have our clients here in the smaller area. And that's one thing that we see a lot when it comes to prosecuting, and we ask them, the ones that are locally will get no's from them more often, because they don't want to put a bad name on somebody who might be well known, or they don't know what's going to come with it, the backlash that could come with it. They think that people in their community might not believe them. It's like the people who are close to them who are like, oh no, they're just like down, or they're just making a big deal out of nothing that happened. And so, I mean, that is here, but we do everything we can. We go anytime we're invited anywhere. I mean, we're always, yes, like we'll make time for it, even if it seems impossible. We'll send somebody. All of us are well adversed at like going to places, giving speeches, telling people what we're about, and educating the community. Before COVID, we were even able to go into schools, not all schools, but a lot of the schools around us. And it was very particular of what we could talk about, but we would try to finagle our way in as best as we could. Because teen dating violence, that's a thing. And so that's usually when we would, around that awareness month is when we would be able to go into schools. And it was a lot about boundaries. What else? Because you used to do that as a youth advocate.
What a good friend looks like.
Yeah.
Versus what a not so good friend.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're trying to do the best we can to help make people aware, and moving along with those movements. I think those movements have helped a lot, to open people's eyes and to see that, these things are not okay. And it's, some people are seeing, like, hey, you're not going to get away with it. I mean, we tell people we'll be your best friend, but you do something that's in our line of work and we'll make sure that, you have the consequences for it.
Yes.
To our best ability anyway.
Yes.
Like, we're going to hold you accountable for those things.
Accountability piece, right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, your state was the lead on this Operation United Front. And it's like, so many people, as you mentioned, don't think it happens in their backyard. They don't think these abuses happen. They don't, because people are often ashamed and carry blame. The disclosure numbers are lower, or like you said, they feel like they can't trust law enforcement, or they can't trust someone in the system. And yet I think we see with operations like what just happened that we are there to provide services now. I think there is more of an understanding of like trauma-informed techniques, ones that you guys are very versed in. Do you feel like some of your partners, some of the agencies that also help, are listening better and being able to believe and say yes and stand firm with them in fighting for justice? Yeah,
absolutely. Like I said before, like we're pretty close with our victim advocates, like our local victim advocates, and with our officers. Well, most of our officers, I mean, we don't see all of them, but like the ones that we do come in contact with. But we're always, we have a good relationship with like our sheriff, the chief of police, here and in like other cities. And they're always inviting us to things. Like we have them coming up. It's like, what's that one room where crime is victim? I don't know, it's like some festival that they're having, and it's like all law enforcement and like fire department, all like those kind of first responders and stuff. And they invited us because they also know that it's important to talk about what we do.
Yes.
And then fire departments, and we actually have training. So we're part of the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and so that's where we get a lot of our training from. And there's actually a piece on there where it's like for law enforcement training, so that they know how to deal with things. And we always offer that. They don't always have to do it, but we were always letting them know, hey, if any of your officers want any training, and they get credit for it, we do have that. I think Jenna and I were talking about with another person planning like a kind of bigger event with like law enforcement, fire department stuff, and then like kind of tailoring a training towards what we do and like things that they can do to help, especially if they come in contact with a victim, since they're going to be the first responders before we are. We have our CIT officers. I've noticed a lot more officers are getting trained, especially in that, versus like when I first started. I didn't even remember hearing a thing about a CIT officer when I first started. And then like over the past few years, I'm always like, request a CIT officer, like if somebody, and they're like, oh, okay. And like, they have a whole bunch. And so it's like really great around here. I don't know if everyone has that. They definitely should.
So they're more specially trained in crisis intervention.
Yeah.
And they're having more mental health need training, things like that, which is so crucial. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
I think not only for the survivors and the victims they're dealing with, but also for themselves, as we have seen a rise in not only suicidal situations with law enforcement officers themselves, but just in some of the cases that they're facing and some of those moments where they're making these incredible decisions of use of force and things, and just the weight that comes along with all of that in that work. Right. Well, it is so good to see people that have taken their life's experiences and been willing to turn all of that inspiration into helping others. I just see the work that you do, and I can't help but think there's got to be cases or individuals that stand out or that stuck with you for cases that you've worked with. Do either of you have one that you can think of top of mind?
So we were talking about before, we were like, do you remember when that happened? Did you remember that? And I know one that we would both remember is there was this one client who had came in, and even though I believe you were the youth advocate at the time, and she didn't have kids, but she had a military background. And so even though Ave wasn't a case manager, she would sometimes sit in crisis intervention with her because they had that piece that they could relate on. And she was also a sexual abuse client, and her and I kind of connected in that piece. And so there were some times that I would crisis intervention with her, and she really didn't even see me hardly. And she had ended up she needed a lot of mental health needs, but she ended up getting them. And at that time we did have a counselor. And so she spent a lot of time with our counselor and stuff. And I remember she really blossomed into a whole new person by the time that she had left us. And if I remember correctly, I believe she left and like went into a rehab facility. So that's where we parted with her. We didn't get to see her all the way through like the very end. But she was in a really good spot when she did leave us, and she was ready for that rehabilitation to start in the next piece of her life. And so I always remember her just because there was a lot of crisis interventioning with her that I was just like that. I had to put my boundaries in place and separate my personal from my work. And
Sure.
But I think it made me better, like at the end of it as well, because I was like, if I can hear that, I can hear anything.
Yeah.
Yes. And being willing to stand by her so strongly, both of you, to see her be restored, and then to go on for additional assistance and deal with some addiction issues and recovery there. You really help people get planted on both feet. And I appreciate that about your work, and both of you overcoming situations where you wondered, is there hope? But you've definitely worked towards that and found your brave, and now you inspire brave in all of your clients every day.
We try. That's the goal.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's always so good when we hear from them. Like sometimes like it's a year or so later and they're calling us and they're like, hey, I just want to let you know this is where I'm at. And it's sometimes the person who answers the phone may not know who they are. And then they'll like go around the office, hey, does this name ring a bell? And all of us are like, oh my gosh, yes, like who gets to talk to her? And then they'll give us the update and we're just like, oh my gosh, that's so great. We've had them show up before, like they just wanted to come say thank you and tell us how things are. And those are the best days.
Well, I love hearing it. And I see a big change. I think we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully, we always take a few steps forward and then one or two back. But with this multi-state operation, all the arrests and all, there were no arrests under the prostitution label, which I really am so proud. And I know your work helps guide that. It's that they are victims. There has been exploitation, most likely from when they were children or young women, and then it's put them in this place of survival. And so it's so nice to see the pivot, Missouri being the lead state in that and rescuing, so many, and then offering all these services for help. It's truly inspirational. And as we head into like the holiday season and kind of the beginning of a new year, what's your like your hope for just the people you work with and those that are there, just to find what would be your gift?
I want to see them get to a good spot, if that's finding them safe and stable housing or going to an appropriate resource that they're needing. That's always the best. And moving them into their own new house or apartment is probably the best day because they get to have that safe, stable housing.
Yeah, those are really nice days.
Terrific. Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, I guess just continuing to instill that hope in people, because there's a lot of times when our clients, even when they're here and they're in a nice, safe environment, but, they still have bad days and they still have bad things happen to them that are out of their control. And fortunately, we're there to help them through it. But I guess just making sure they don't ever lose that hope, because it's happened. I mean, we've had people who are like up here on cloud 9, and then within a few days they're back down at rock bottom because something isn't going their way. They didn't get an ex parte, their paperwork's not working for things that they're trying to get, a car breaking down, or childcare falling through. I mean, we see all these things that are still happening even though they're with us, but just make sure they don't lose that hope that we're all going to have bad days still. It'll be all right. We'll figure it out together. Like they're not on their own. And so like, just don't give up. Like it'll work out in the end, hopefully.
Wow, that is wonderful to hear. I love that. We'll get through it together. And, it's people like you that allow survivors to move forward and find their voice again. And I appreciate being able to highlight, your stories of Brave, both of you, and then just to allow those listening or that will watch in the future to understand a little bit about what it looks like to provide services on the other side of some of these tragedies. So I thank you guys for being here today, and I'm sure we'll meet again. I'm going to have Jenna on, the director of your program, soon to talk more about how that came about and what some of your goals are in the future. I love it. So those watching, thank you so much for being with us today. I think this was a really rich conversation about two women who just are fighting for the voice of others, and they're fighting for justice, whatever that looks like. And so I just want to remind those watching, though, that a lot of these stories are found in the darkness of really difficult moments. And like Sam said, it's about seeing hope. It's about being willing to look forward and realize that things can change and that things can get better. So until next time, I just hope that everyone can be brave. Thank you.